That's great. So over the past few weeks, we've had guest speakers, and we will continue to have guest speakers a little bit into May. So this is an awesome opportunity for us to hear from community members that all specialize in different areas. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Amy from Barefoot Farms. We've had a really great relationship with Amy for the past year, maybe. So Amy helps with Barefoot Farms and literally comes to us and says, what do you think Bounty and Soul would like this year? And Allie and I just tell her all the produce that we think people would like, and then she grows it. So really incredible, and anything that's extra or that she's willing to donate comes our way. So a really incredible partnership here, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about chickweed. So thank you, Amy, so much for joining us today, and thank you guys for listening.
Hi! Hi. So, like Lindsay said, I'm a farmer, and I get a farm for this awesome farm that is a nonprofit, which means I don't go to farmers markets. I literally just grow for Bounty and Soul and myself. And it's awesome, and I eat a lot of really good food, and I get to share it, which is so wonderful. So Bounty and Soul said that they were thinking about a workshop on cooking with love, and I'm thinking, like, yeah, no problem. I cook literally all of my food from scratch because I live on a farm, and that is the most affordable and fun way to do it. And then I started really thinking, what does it mean to cook with love, and realizing that kind of up until recently I didn't cook with love, and for a lot of my life cooking was a chore and it wasn't fun. So I'm curious how many of you feel where you lie on this spectrum. Who thinks cooking is a chore most of the time? Fair enough. Who feels when they cook it's an act of love and it's really enjoyable and it's fun? Oh, I like that. Yeah. And so it's half and half. And I think, it's never always going to be great. You have to do it 3 times a day. Of course it's going to be a little exhausting. But when I started kind of thinking about what does it mean to cook with love, I thought of 3, maybe even 4 different main reasons that you could draw on to cook with love. So the first thing was nutrition, which obviously Bounty and Soul is all about. I'm not a nutritionist. I just know what you read on the internet, just as much as anybody else. But definitely I'm always thinking when I'm cooking, how is this nourishing my body and my family's body? And that's definitely something I get into, especially as someone who grows healthy food, is I almost get off the healthier something is. I'm oh yeah, that's vitamin C, let's do this. That for me is how many vitamins can you rank? Because it feels so good, and I've seen the difference that makes in my own body. The other thing I thought about was community. Cooking with love is all about sharing, potlucks and sharing with your neighbors and what that kind of means to cook with love for other people. The third thing I thought about was history, kind of where our food comes from, and channeling our families into our cooking and our traditions and kind of the culture of food. And lastly, creativity, because it's an art form, and there can be a lot of fun in that. So my background a little bit with food was I grew up really, really poor. We never had a lot of food around, and so food was very stressful as a child. It was not something that was fun. It was how are we going to get the next meal? And so that was kind of my beginnings with food. And then as I got older, even though we still didn't have a lot of money, I started having I was suddenly aware of my body, and I'm sure a lot of ladies in the room can understand what that's maybe more than the men, no offense. But that food was this thing, it was I was punishing myself a lot of times. I was always I don't want to eat too much food because everyone in my family's overweight, and I was overweight, and I was it was never pure pleasure, because it was constantly this fear of eating too much, it wasn't a good thing to eat food. And so I think that was kind of a hindrance, and that was kind of my childhood with food. It wasn't fun, even though I've always liked eating. I mean, I like cake, I'm not crazy. But so after that, I went to college, and I sold everything I owned and became a traveler, and pretty much just lived out of my backpack for a few years and saw these other cultures and how they did food, and it totally blew my mind because for the first time I was like hanging out with people who weren't eating food from a box or even from the grocery store. It was like real food that had been grown for centuries, and like people didn't use recipes, like they just knew it in their hands, you know? Like I lived in the Middle East for a while, and there was like that food, I mean, that's the food that they were eating in the Bible. Like, that food is old. And it's really interesting when you think about how food grows, how, you know, in Lebanon, like they grow chickpeas and olives and lemon trees. They all grow really well there. Well, you put all that together and it's hummus. And it's just like made so much sense to me. Like, oh, of course, that's why hummus is from the Middle East, and that's why they eat it all the time. And I started thinking about that with, you know, traveling through Mexico, and everyone's like, everywhere you go you hear this sound, because everyone's like making the tortillas, you know? And they like, there's no recipe for that. That is like, you do that when you're 2. and that's real food. It's like water and cornmeal. It's amazing. And they're not, yeah, it's not like this thing that stresses them out, like how are we gonna make that? Like their families have been growing corn forever. And all of our families have been growing food forever up until like 100 years ago. So it's kind of cool thinking about like, what did your family do? So my family, I don't look it, but I'm actually Indonesian. And my grandma makes like homemade hot sauce from scratch, and that's like, that to her is like childhood food, which is kind of hard for me to imagine, like little kids eating hot sauce, but in Indonesia they do. And she fries up like tofu, and to me, at tofu, I'm like, oh, it's like vegetarian hippie food. But to her, she like fries it up with like pork fat, you know, and that's like our family's tradition. Or on my mom's side, my mom grew up, we don't really have like a long history, just like Irish descendants, but my mom grew up in Orange County, California. So to this day, my whole family, whenever they get together, we all eat tacos. Like, we're not Mexican at all, but that's like, they grew up in a Mexican community, and I didn't, but now that's like what I associate with my mother's cooking. It's like, oh, tacos. It's like really nourishing to my soul to like eat that. It's very nostalgic. So I'm curious if you guys have any family, like what does your family make? Or what's like a recipe that like you eat with your family? Does anyone have any examples?
Chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake! Is that like your family's get-together food?
Yeah, my grandma makes.
Oh, that sounds good. I need one of those grandmas. Did you have one?
Yeah, I grew up watching my mother cook, and she did cook a lot of fresh vegetables.
Nice.
And along with the meat and potatoes, but she wasn't openly teaching me, but I was just watching her, and I really appreciate that her mother had a huge garden, and that's where she learned. And my grandmother would can things, and I would go into her little room where she kept her canned stuff, and just in awe of looking at the bottles of vegetables and fruits that she brought out of her garden.
That
inspires me.
That is so cool, and that's like such a good example of like, really in just the last 2 generations, we've kind of lost those traditions, but that is like, everyone used to do that. Like, everyone had their own food, and you just think like, that's like in us, you know? Like, cooking is in us. It's like, just in a few years, we've lost that. But for all the time before of human history, that's what our mothers and our grandmothers were doing. And there's a lot of love in that, like really connecting with like your roots, like where do you come from? Does anyone else have any good ones?
My mom pretty much just cooked Middle Eastern and European foods. It was all from scratch, so yeah.
That's amazing. And do you cook some of that now?
I really wished that I had paid attention.
But I bet like when you smell that food, that like gets your heart.
And I feel ashamed at the same time because I don't know.
Oh, you should feel ashamed. But I understand that, yeah. But I think it's a really common story. I think most people in this room probably have that similar story. Like, oh, I know my grandmother did that, but I didn't really pick up on it. I think that's pretty common these days. Do you have one?
I grew up in Pennsylvania on a farm, and my grandmother used a wood stove and cooked for about 20 people that worked on the farm, 3 meals, and you always had potatoes on the table. There was always some kind of bread on the table. Relishes, there was always what they call 7 sweets and 7 sours. How did she do it without all the modern conveniences? I'll never know. On a wood stove. And she produced like pastries and cakes and relishes and jams and homemade bread and like these big elaborate meals.
Very cool. That's amazing. Isn't that inspiring? That's so cool. Does anyone else have any?
Yeah, I have a little one. Allie and I both, for those of you that don't know, Allie is my aunt. I feel like she's been slowly announcing that throughout the weeks. But anyway, Allie and I both are, cooking is very prevalent in our family. My grandfather's side of the family is all Armenian, but my grandma's side of the family is Dutch. And my grandfather was the very first member of the family to marry a non-Armenian. And so for my grandma to be welcomed into the family, meanwhile she has blonde hair, blue eyes, as Duchess can be, like a porcelain doll. And so for her to be welcomed into the family, she had to shadow my grandfather's mom in the kitchen for like 6 straight months, learning how to cook Armenian food. And she like gained respect by my family when she could show that she could cook really well. So now when we come together as families, everyone's really excited for Nancy's meal, maybe not Armanush's or all these other names, but Nancy. So it's really cool. Yalanchi, like stuffed grape leaves. That's my grandma's like specialty meal that she brings. Yeah, and it's, we like when we're going to New York to visit with family, we all head straight to the Yalanchi table and just stay there the whole time.
That's amazing. Does anyone have you have one?
The only really homemade item I remember my mom taking time to make was homemade tomato soup. From scratch tomatoes, and she would, separate, cook it down and then take out the heavier skins. And, a lot of the other meals, it was very, quick. Meat, potato, canned vegetable or something, because there wasn't time to prepare. But the tomato soup, that was a day. She would spend a day.
That sounds amazing. Oh, and the smell of tomato soup cooking.
And we occasionally grew tomatoes in the yard. Not much of a vegetable.
That's so cool. Anyone else? Yeah?
Pigs in a blanket. We took, something similar to like meatloaf, but we'd wrap it with cabbage leaves.
Oh, nice.
And, tomato sauce over, and so everybody got in there and did this.
Yes.
Rolling and...
Oh, I love, that's like such a sense of community too. I think a lot of times too, our families probably did that in the past. It was like it took up many hands make light work, right? Like, you're talking about big meals from scratch, like you were saying. Sounds like your family, your grandmother was a rock star, but like, I do think, a lot of times that's how you incorporated children into the kitchen too. You got them rolling things, and we don't do that as much anymore, I think. And that's a really fun way I've found to connect with, especially the little ones in my family, is to get them in there doing tasks and kind of passing on those traditions so that they're not lost, so that they have that same feeling when they smell tomato soup cooking on the stove all day. Yeah, that's beautiful. The other thing I was thinking about too with food, I've really just been learning about this in the last couple of years, which is that like thinking not just like the food we make, the dishes, but like the seeds and where those come from. And like in the, we're pretty south here, and there's a lot of collard greens here, collards and yams, and that's like southern food. You like cook down a bunch of greens, but actually that dish and collard greens came from West Africa, and people carried the seeds of collard greens in their pockets when they came over in the slave trade, and then they started making those greens on plantations. So when you think about like when you're like cooking those collard greens, like think of the history in that. Like that is like that's like African food, and that's like new here and so amazing that we're cooking this thing that has like such a rich and really sad history in a lot of ways, and there's so much in that, and that's true for so many, you know, food has really moved around a lot in the last 100 years, and even a lot of the spices we eat, like, came, you know, even the spice, like you buy curry powder at the store, like that came from a farm in India, and I love thinking about like where all these little things come from and how they influence our lives now. And I think when you kind of get to the root of food, there's a lot of like love and gratitude there, and that's really helps for me to like stop what I'm doing and be like, this is an act of love. Like, I'm so grateful to everyone who brought this to me, and the history behind that, and all of their work in the kitchen and their work in the fields, and how they carried those seeds in their pockets for thousands of years to get it to my plate. And it's amazing to me. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? So yeah, for me, I've kind of had a shift in how I think about food. Now it's this really lovely thing to cook, and I adore spending time in the kitchen, and even though I spend way too much time in the kitchen, and I've slowed down with it. It's like, once I stopped thinking of it as a chore, it started to feel, you know, it's just like a shift in the mindset. Like nothing changed, I was doing the same thing, but suddenly it was like this fun process, and I'm like connecting to my history and other people's history, and then you get creative, and that was kind of why I chose the recipe I did today. I was like, well, what could I do? We have like beans and quinoa, but then I was like, what am I eating right now? And I eat weird food, so I'm always kind of like scared to share that because I eat whatever's like growing anywhere. But what I brought was a lot of this. There's a bunch outside. This is called chickweed. And chickweed is actually a weed by most people's standards. I'm sure you've all seen it growing. I have a little diagram on the handouts for you to check out if you ever want to like find it yourself growing around. It's highly nutritious. It's, let's see, I pulled up like, once again, I am so not a nutritionist, but it's, let's see, high in vitamin B, vitamin 1, vitamin A, iron, zinc, magnesium. I mean, this stuff is like really good for you. It's also great if you have skin issues. It like will clear up, if you eat chickweed every day, you'll probably have clear skin. It's amazing. It's really hydrating. It's got a lot of water content in it, and it kind of tastes just like an herby lettuce. Like, it's really tasty. It's and it grows everywhere. It's like totally wild. You're nodding. You're like, I've seen this. So the other thing mixed in with some of the chickweed out there and that I'm going to put in what we're making is this stuff. It's called dead nettle, also a weed, but also edible. It's in the mint family. It's got a square stem and a little bit of a fragrance, which is kind of a telltale sign from anything in the mint family. And virtually most plants in the mint family are edible. It's also just like a healthy green, and the taste is kind of like nothing special, but you can just like throw it into anything and we're like boosted nutrition, you know, instead of like having spinach, I'll just throw this in because it grows everywhere. And it's, I mean, most wild greens are actually a lot healthier than cultivated greens because they're like pulling up the minerals from the soil, and they haven't been, you know, all the greens I grow from seed are like, they're altered in some way. They're altered for taste, they're altered for size, not like genetically modified alter, but like we pick the things we like over the years. We'll be like, oh, we like this kind of spinach because it's big. And then sometimes in that choice process over the generations, some of the nutritional value goes up. Maybe taste goes up, you know, but vitamin whatever goes down. And that's just the reality of cultivated food. But with wild food, this is just like the healthy stuff. Like, this exists for animals to eat, and we're animals. So that's what's going in what we're making today's pesto. And it's really good for you, and it's really tasty. So yeah, this is called dead nettle. Sure, yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll just pass this little bunch around.
Because from a distance, it looks like hops.
It does kind of look like hops, but it's, hops are, so this grows like this on the ground, like a grass, really. Does anyone else want to check it out?
Yeah, I'd love to see.
It grows, yeah, really like just on the ground, maybe 6 inches tall. whereas hops are a long, long vine. And the flowers are a little bit different. This has a purple color on the tip. Hops tend to just be green.
And it's called what?
It's called dead nettle or creeping Charlie. I mean, they're all kind of terms that we've thrown around over the years.
Before flowers or after, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You can use it at any time. It's usually more recognizable while it's flowering. And it flowers very
My driveway, so
Yeah, yeah. My only thing with harvesting dead nettle and chickweed, I would just be careful of harvesting it anywhere like you're driving over, because you don't want like gasoline on it or something. Like it's better a little bit on the fringe.
Your chickweed basically makes purslane.
Yeah, I think
Very much like purslane.
they're very similar. Yeah, and purslane is like a wild.
It's just a weed.
It is. Yeah, I also love purslane.
High source of omega-3 purslane.
So is chickweed.
Too.
Yeah, purslane is lovely because it's like, it's so lemony. Yeah, I love it in pesto as well. If I had some growing on the farm, I probably would have brought that.
Is there anything that looks really similar to these two that you cannot eat?
Yeah, there is. Well, so all the lookalikes.
Hey guys, I know we have a lot of exciting things being passed around, but if we could give Amy our attention, that'd be great.
Thank you. It's so echoey in here. All the lookalikes for these, nothing will kill you that looks like these. They might make you feel not the best. Like maybe a little nauseous or something if you were to eat a ton of them. But nothing's gonna it's not like mushrooms where they're like poisonous and gonna kill you.
Okay.
But with these, I always say with anything you're gonna harvest yourself that you didn't grow, be sure, do a Google search, compare pictures. Chickweed, the main teller is that the leaves grow opposite each other, and on any lookalike, they're gonna grow in different places on the stem. So that's a pretty easy way to be able to tell. I also put some identifying factors on this handout, but I mean, you could do an internet search and it's all over the place. Thank you. And same with, there is another weed that looks very similar to this, it's called henbit, because hens and chickens eat it. Also why this is called chickweed, because chickens love it. But it's not as nutritious, but it won't hurt you. So that's why these are two really safe, they grow everywhere and the lookalikes are different enough and they won't kill you. But you don't even need to harvest your own because I brought tons. Yes.
So I just wanted to clear my grandma's name. She also would harvest dandelions from the yard and cook them in the lard.
Yes,
That was,
absolutely.
what she was pretty well known for.
That's awesome.
She deep fried dandelion greens?
Well, you cook them in stir fry them.
Well,
in the lard.
you
Yeah.
you only
pan
take
fried.
a tablespoon of fat and you mix it with vinegar and you warm it. And you pour it over a hot salad dressing, wilts.
Yes, definitely. Dandelion greens, it's so funny because we've spent so much time and money trying to kill dandelions in our yards, but they're one of the healthiest foods you can eat. And you can eat every single part of the dandelion. You can eat the flower, the stem, the root, the leaves, and they're a powerhouse of health. I literally go into my yard like your grandma and just pick dandelion leaves and eat them. I make dandelion wine from the leaves, the roots, and the flowers, and convince myself that it's healthy. So, all right, let's get blending. So I'm just gonna eyeball this because I don't have measuring cups, and that's what I always do. But it's roughly 3 cups, whatever. I just am gonna make a lot because I want everyone to be able to try some. Put some of that in, pack it in. This is a really powerful food processor, but if you make it in a blender, you might have to do a little at a time or chop it up first, but this baby can handle it. All right, then we're gonna do some garlic, because, garlic's delicious and healthy. Let's see, I don't want to kill you guys with too much garlic. We'll just try a little bit first. I can do a lot of garlic. All right, maybe I'll take that out. Then some olive oil. So I said a 1/4 cup, but I'm just kind of eyeballing this. Olive oil, is like so healthy. I used to be so scared of eating fat, and I eat so much olive oil now because it's like a good fat. And when you're making something like this has no calories in it. Chickweed is like 0. And so throwing some olive oil in is actually like good. Then you're getting a little more calories to keep yourself going. Another healthy fat is almonds. You can use any nut of your choice. Pesto is like, I think it's known for being used with pine nuts. I'm not a rich woman, so I never buy pine nuts because I don't know if you guys have ever seen them, but they're like obscenely expensive. And really any nut will do in pesto, which was a great discovery that I learned. And it gives a different flavor. Like an almond is going to be different from a walnut. And so you can kind of, there's like that creativity side, and you can like play around with whatever nut you have on hand. Just do like 2 handfuls-ish. I don't use a lot because like they're precious, like almonds. Almonds are very precious. They come from a tree in California. A little bit of salt, which, can you tell I buy everything in bulk? I live in the middle of nowhere. This is my salt container. Let's see, do a couple pinches here. And you can use apple cider vinegar is a really, I'm sure Allie talks about all the time, it's super healthy. I could not find mine, so I brought some lemon juice, which is, you know, also cleansing. And I'm a little partial to it from my time in the Middle East because I just like love lemon juice and dips because that's what they do. So the recipe says, what did I say? Like 1 to 3 tablespoons, but I'm just gonna see what that does. We'll taste it as we go. And then a little water, because actually traditionally pesto I think doesn't have water, and you just use a lot of oil, but that's like a lot of oil. Once again, olive oil, not kind of expensive, and you know, it's a lot of fat, so I just use a little water to keep like things blending, and I think it tastes the same. Alright, so I've never cooked in front of anyone like this before, so I really hope this works.
We're all very wanting to join in.
Yeah. All right, let's see what happens. And then I always just blend it and then like taste as I go. And then we'll just, you know, that's like the great thing I love about pesto is it's such like a work in progress. Like sometimes you start out and you're like, what did I just make? And then you just keep adding stuff and it becomes amazing. It's like the opposite of baking, which has to be like this perfect science. Which is why I love dips in general for that reason. All right. Go, baby, go.
It smells good already.
Can you smell it? Yeah. It's so, I harvested this, I got up really early this morning and harvested this. You're welcome. There's still mist in the fields. It's very romantic.
That's a nice time to be out.
Yeah. Alright, let's see what we've got here. Anyone want to try? Mm-hmm. Try work in progress? Alright, I want your opinion.
Okay.
Tell me what you think. I know what it needs more of. I'm curious what you think. Yeah. You like it? Good. So I think it's a little dry for me. I like to use it as like a sauce or on crackers or that sort of thing. So this is like a little, I think I'll add a little more liquid so that it'll be like a little bit more sauce-like. I love it on pasta. It takes like, instead of marinara, like this stuff is so healthy too. Sometimes you don't feel like salad, but you like want to eat pasta, but I'll put this on pasta and I'm like, it's healthy, it's good. I think I'm gonna do a little bit more salt. And a little, I don't know, do you guys like tangy stuff? I like a little punch with my food, like, especially because you're gonna be putting this on something a little more bland probably, you know, like a cracker or even like carrot sticks or toast, or I put this on an egg sandwich and it's amazing. All right, let's try that again. So I'm curious too, I just thought of how do you guys like share with your community? Like, what do you do? I know so I'm a farmer, and farmers have a lot of potlucks because we don't have a lot of money, but we have a lot of food. And that's like how we give to each other. So when you go to a farmer potluck, there's like 5 people and 12 dishes, and everyone eats an obscene amount of food because they've been farming all day. But I'm curious, like, what do you guys do? Like, how do you share with your neighbors? Do you do potlucks? Like, what are your like community traditions around sharing food? Does anyone have anything?
My church, I go to, we have like a Friday movie thing.
Nice.
So we bring food and you got to eat there just exact time, or you're going to miss out because everybody's going to stand on it.
I love that.
And then potluck once a month otherwise.
That's great. Yeah, I think potlucks are such an amazing way to share food. I have some neighbors who I probably wouldn't otherwise see that much, but once a month we get together with them and we do a themed potluck, which is so much fun. So I'm getting together with them tomorrow. We're doing a pizza theme. So it's like everyone brings a component of pizza and you all like make this shared thing. So like I'll make the dough, they'll make the sauce, and we'll all bring toppings. And last month we did Indian food, and so everyone made, like none of us knew how to cook Indian food, and so we all just like figured out a recipe and made an Indian dish and had this like gourmet like Indian meal, which is, you know, would have cost us like $20 a plate or something at a restaurant. Like it was incredible.
Yeah.
And actually it turns out Indian food is like really cheap food. It's like vegetables and spices. And like once you have those spices, it's like very, very simple. I'm all about potlucks. All right, let me give this a go. I think it's good. It's a little chunky, but since we're not eating it on things, because I didn't bring crackers, I think that'll be good. Should I serve up stuff here, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we can do